So, you chose to watch this video. Wrong! There have been a few experiments like this now, but thanks to, being able to scan the brain and thanks to machine learning and stuff, researchers can now not only predict that you're about to do something based on your brain activity, but they can actually see when you're about to decide to do something. That is before you've consciously decided to do it, including some stuff about what your decision will be. And last I checked, they can do some stuff up to 11 seconds in advance of you deciding to do it. So you think you consciously decided to watch this video? Maybe not. Your brain decided through unconscious mental processes and then just gaslighted in your conscious mind into thinking that it was its idea the whole time. So intuitively, though, we feel like we're making the decisions. And when we role-play a character in an RPG, we, at the very least, feel that we are in charge of the conscious decisions of the character that we are the agent of. But what about their unconscious mental processes? Whose domain is it to control stuff about your character that your character is not in control of themselves? Hi, I'm Matt. Welcome to the Tomb of Lime. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And there were always choices to make, every day, every hour, offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would or would not submit to those powers which threatened to rob you of your very self. Your inner freedom, which determined whether or not you become the plaything to circumstance, renouncing freedom and dignity. So RPG characters are subject to involuntary stuff all the time. So when your character hits 0 hit points and you fall unconscious, it's not voluntary, but no one seems to care too much about that because it's out of the character's control. But people do tend to get a little bit more antsy about anything that takes the player's agency away. Making decisions seems to be an integral part of the content of playing an RPG. It's part of the thing that you're there to do. So when it comes to involuntary stuff that isn't, being physically coerced or forced to do something, it seems to me that games tend to put that authority into the hands of one of 3 places. Either they put it into the hands of the GM, they put it into the hands of the player of that character, or they put it in the hands of the system. I've been trying to get away as much as I can from authoritarian GMing, because the more authority the GM has over the game world, the more the players have to consult with the GM, asking what we call mother may I questions in order to be able to interact with the world. And I think that's unintuitive and frankly annoying. The idea that the GM runs the whole world, is where the GM being able to say to the characters, you feel this, passive sensory perceptions appear to be an involuntary thing. But because verbing the players, telling them what they feel or think or see or whatever, is tantamount to role-playing that character, and we don't want the GMs playing the PCs, that's the player's job. And B, because giving the GM that sort of authority introduces a certain bias for the GM's idea of what should happen or the way that the world should be according to them. See, for parity's sake, if the GM can decide the involuntary actions of the PCs, wouldn't it make sense that the players can decide the involuntary actions of the NPCs? So because of these things, I'd say that the GM having this authority is undesirable. So what about the player choosing? Well, if the player is the agent of the player character, especially if you created that character, you have had the authority to put in place the things that affect their unconscious mental processes anyway. So how is this any different? It's like an extension of that creation. On the other hand, if we want role-playing a character to be as close to the mindset of that character as possible, then it's unintuitive for us to be in control of things that that character is not in control of. I don't get to choose my own unconscious mental processes, so why should I get to choose those of my character? Like, am I role-playing that character? Or am I role-playing that character's brain that puppeteers their, body and their conscious processes together? All right, so what about the system being in control? Not every game has these elements. Sometimes it's framed as authorial, like a storytelling device, but sometimes it is diegetic. It's like the difference between, in The One Ring, you have the shadow, and in myriad other games, you have stress or sanity or whatever. But either way, these are sort of like a way of the system governing when your character is going to have a feeling that is outside of their control. I think one of the motivations for doing it this way is to mechanize, to bake into the system a mechanical enforcement of a kind of style of role play that forces the player to take suboptimal choices when they wouldn't voluntarily do so, even if it was the most human and appropriate thing for the character to do. No doubt there are dumb characters in movies, right? But I feel like the casual watcher is maybe a little hard on characters in movies. They're a little bit detached from what it would be like to be them. Like, why are you so whingy? Like, get in the damn robot, Shinji. We've got too many John Wicks and John Constantines and John Carter and John Rambo and John Kruger and John McClane and John Matrix and John Spartan, John Connor, John Kimball, all just doing like action hero murder stuff. And people start to identify with these characters and then they start to go, well, if I was in that situation, that's how I'd act. So when it comes to role playing in an RPG, they do this sort of self-insert of this idealized version of themselves, John RPG, fed on 80s machismo, and they make the most two-dimensional, most boring, inhuman character that they can. And so it's become so widespread that this phenomena that the game designers bake into their mechanics a way to try and circumvent this insufficiency of roleplay, a generalized lack of empathy, I think. It's not a great reason to have a mechanic, to try and force people to roleplay that would otherwise be disinclined to. Not ideal. I do like the idea of the system being an impartial way to adjudicate the involuntary stuff that your characters might do. So maybe there's a middle ground. So rather than the game dictate what your character will do, because it will be very difficult to be able to make a mechanic like a table of effects or whatever that really captures the nuance of the different things that your character could do under certain situations. I think you'd rather your mechanic to inform the player of that this kind of thing is occurring and maybe some impetus or guidance in what way it should go. But ultimately, it's still up to the player what they want to do about it, how to role play that thing. A good stress or whatever mechanic should inform the role play. It shouldn't prescribe it, ideally. So I guess my answer to the question is somewhere between the player being in control and somewhere between the system. This would still be subject to abuse by John RPG, but don't play with people like that. Or show them that it's more fun, or more interesting, engaging, and rewarding to play with flawed characters. But let's have a look at a specific issue that I've been thinking about, and that is social mechanics. As a GM, I want to roleplay. There's a certain pleasure in roleplaying, getting to roleplay all these different characters. It's a different pleasure to roleplay one character to great depth, but either way, both of you, the player and the GM, are here to roleplay in your role-playing game. A lot of games have asymmetrical mechanics in the social department. The PCs can do stuff to the NPCs that the NPCs cannot do to the player characters. The player characters get to make all their decisions for their characters, but the NPCs are subject to the higher intimidation rolls or whatever it is for the players, from the players. And you can imagine players balking at the idea of being told that they have to surrender because the NPC rolled high enough on an intimidation roll, right? It's taking my agency. Well, how do you think it feels for a GM in the same position? I don't like it. Games often treat NPCs as like objects and not characters that you have to role play, and they don't see the GM as a role player. I want to role play. I want to play the game. It seems like there might be two ways out of this, and that is either just don't worry about mechanizing the social side of it, or to make the mechanics symmetrical. Not worrying might lead to your stubborn John RPG characters, and mechanizing it leads to players balking at things if they're not, I suppose, appropriately prepared. I think symmetry can work. It can still be fun to roleplay a character where you have been essentially told what your character's reaction is, and it's up to you to embody it, manifest it, whatever, reify it, right? Basically in the same way that if you lost a combat, you would have to roleplay being dead or whatever. But RPGs are social games. They're played in a social manner. You're actually socializing when you're socializing as your character in an RPG, but you're not actually swinging a sword when you're swinging a sword as a character in an RPG. So I think it kind of gives social interactions a special status in this kind of game, and that they can feel better if they work in the game in the same way that they do in real life, because it's just an intuitive almost one-to-one match for how it works. And it feels like that we get to make the decision, that we are not prescribed the decision by our brain, no matter whether that is true or not. So I have been managing this in my game by making it non-prescriptive and symmetrical. That is, neither the players can force the NPCs to do stuff that they wouldn't be inclined to do as I would roleplay them, and vice versa. But the social mechanics aren't there to do that anyway. They are simply there to inform, and it's up to you how you want to roleplay. So I have an insight roll, but it doesn't detect lies or give specific relational information about the character, right? It more tells the player something about the personality of the person they are talking to, and then it's up to them how they proceed with it. It's an idea I took from a game called Deus Ex. I think it was the Mankind Divided, the second one of that series. In that game, you have some cybernetic implant that gives you the person's like brain waves or pheromones or something. It tells you a type of personality that they have, but it doesn't tell you what you have to do about it. It's up to you to decide, what approach to take when talking to them. And rolling success on intimidation or whatever it might be doesn't make the NPC do anything. It informs the GM about how they're going to play that character. So I watched a lot of interrogation videos as part of my research for, the mechanics and how they worked. And one thing I noticed that when the police are interrogating these people, they almost don't care whether the person tells the truth or not, as long as they just tell them something. As long as they keep talking, because whatever they say, whether it's a lie or that's the truth, it gives them ammunition that they can use to decide how to proceed. So success in my game it doesn't tell the NPC what they should say. It just keeps the conversation going. So I have some stress mechanics and resolve mechanics that dictate how long this can go on for and whatever. But basically, I like it when the social mechanics inform rather than prescribe, even if I think that prescriptions can work if you're in the right mindset to be able to roleplay that way. So I'm interested to know, whose domain do you think it is that gets to decide the things about the characters that are not within the character's own control? Is there a game that that does this well? Do you think it's dependent on how on board a player is to be able to be prescribed or cajoled or forced to do stuff? Do we need the system to manage it all, or to what degree? I'm sure there's more innovations and more work that can be done on this as far as design goes in RPGs, which I'm excited to see. But it's just, I don't know, it feels like a topic that is there in the rules sometimes, but it's almost assumed. It's never really properly delineated. So I'm interested to see where we can go with it and what works best. Man, I just, thinking about RPGs, man, it's just stimulating, right? I just enjoy it. There's always something new to think about that I hadn't considered before I run into some issue that, and it's always interesting to bend my mind. But I know that there's so many people thinking about this stuff and bending their minds to it and looking to innovate it on it. And I'm just thrilled to see all the interesting ways that people deal with these problems. So, hit me with interesting ways that people deal with the problem of involuntary actions for player characters. But until next time, my name is Matt. This is the Tomb of Lime. Thank you very much for listening. I haven't been able to move very much in this video because I got this puppy on my lap. Eat a little donut. Aren't you a donut?